The detection systems aboard the Galactic Council's observation vessel pinged with unusual activity. Earth, a planet previously deemed unworthy of contact, was suddenly broadcasting signals that couldn't be ignored. "Analysis complete," announced Director Tei, her compound eyes reflecting the data screens. "The humans have achieved quantum communication capabilities, though rather primitive." Commander Chuno studied the holographic display of the blue-green planet. "Have we miscalculated their development timeline?" "Significantly," Tei confirmed. "They were supposed to remain isolated for another century, at minimum." The Council assembled a first contact team led by the Vrax, an insectoid species known for their analytical minds and careful approach. Their research vessels had intercepted human entertainment broadcasts, war films, survival documentaries, competitive sports, leading them to prepare for potentially aggressive beings. Science Officer Dongo checked his translation device once more as their ship entered Earth's atmosphere. "Remember the protocol. No sudden movements. They may interpret any gesture as threatening." Their landing in a rural field outside Seoul drew immediate attention. Local authorities established a perimeter, but to the aliens' surprise, there was no military presence, only curious civilians gathering at a respectful distance. When the hatch opened, Dongho was the first to emerge, his exoskeleton gleaming in the sunlight. He had prepared for fear, for weapons pointed at him, not for an elderly human approaching with a container. "You must be tired from your journey," the old man said through the translator. "I brought some tea." The Vrax team exchanged confused glances as more humans approached, offering various foods and asking excited questions. Most puzzling were the small humans, children, who pointed and whispered with undisguised wonder. "Can I touch your shell?" asked one small girl, looking up at Dongo with wide eyes. "It is an exoskeleton, not a shell," he corrected, but found himself lowering his arm anyway. As the child's fingers gently tapped his forearm, Dongho's scientific mind raced. This behavior contradicted all their predictions. Where was the fear, the aggression, the suspicion? Instead, he found only curiosity and welcome. And it unsettled him more than any hostility could have. The next day, Dongho led a smaller team into the city. They had expected concrete barriers and weapons. Instead, they found streets lined with people holding welcome signs. Some humans bowed deeply as they passed. Others offered small gifts. "This does not match our research," said Juri, the team's cultural specialist. Her antennae twitched with confusion. Their entertainment signals suggested a species obsessed with conflict. Agreed Dongo. Yet we see no evidence of this behavior. A local official named Sunho guided them to a meeting hall where Earth's representatives waited. The room had been prepared with special chairs to accommodate Vrax's body structure. "We are honored by your presence," said the human leader, bowing deeply. "We have many questions, but first, is there anything you need for your comfort?" Dongho's mandibles clicked with surprise. The Vrax approach to new species always began with establishing dominance hierarchies and security protocols. Comfort was irrelevant. "Your atmosphere is sufficient," he replied stiffly. Sunho smiled. "Then perhaps you would like to tell us about your world." The meeting proceeded with basic information exchange. Throughout, Dongho noted that the humans asked more questions about Vrax culture than about their technology. This seemed inefficient. That evening, the team was invited to stay with human families rather than return to their ship. The Council had warned against this, but refusing might damage relations. Dongho found himself in the home of a scientist named Hana. Her dwelling contained an unexpected mixture of advanced technology and primitive objects. "Why do you keep these?" Dongho asked, pointing to books made of actual paper. "I like how they feel," Hana replied, handing him one. "Some things are worth keeping for reasons beyond practicality." Dongho did not understand but noted this illogical attachment for his report. At the evening meal, Hana's small offspring, Gio, stared openly at Dongho. The Vrax's new human children were curious but unpredictable. He remained perfectly still, hoping to avoid provoking the young human. "Do you have a family?" Joe asked suddenly. "I have genetic relatives," Dong-ho answered carefully. "Do you miss them?" Dong-ho's antennae twitched. Missing requires emotional attachment. Vrak's relationships are based on practical function. "That sounds lonely," said Gio, returning to his food. Dong-ho had no response. The concept of lonely was not applicable to Vrak society. Later, Hana showed Dong-ho to a room prepared for him. She had adjusted the temperature and humidity to match Vrak's preferences from their database. "I hope you'll be comfortable," she said. "Please tell me if you need anything." When she left, Dong-ho began recording his observations for the council. Humans appear to value comfort and emotional satisfaction above efficiency. They prioritize individual experiences over collective outcomes. He paused, uncertain how to describe what he had observed. "They seem genuinely interested in our well-being without obvious strategic advantage. This behavior contradicts all predictive models." The next morning, Dong-ho woke to sounds in the dwelling. He found Hana preparing food, while Jiho gathered items for his learning institution. "You may observe our morning routine if you wish," Hana offered. Dong-ho watched as the humans engaged in seemingly inefficient behaviors. Hana asked Jiho about his dreams. They discussed plans for the day, and before leaving, they embraced. "Why do you touch in this manner?" Dong-ho asked. "It's a hug," Jiho explained. "It makes us feel connected." On their way to the official meetings, they passed a small park where humans were walking furry quadrupeds on tethers. "What purpose do these creatures serve?" Dong-ho asked, watching a human bend to collect the animal's waste. "They're pets," Hana explained. "They provide companionship. You care for beings that consume resources without contributing equivalent value." Hana laughed. "Love isn't about equal exchange, Dong-ho." The word love did not translate in his device. Dong-ho filed it for further investigation. At midday, an unexpected rainstorm began. Dong-ho observed humans sharing portable shelters called umbrellas with strangers. One human noticed Dong-ho's exposed position and immediately diverted to share their protection. "Your exoskeleton might rust," the human said with genuine concern. "It does not rust," Dong-ho replied, but noted the unsolicited assistance. By the end of the first week, Dong-ho's reports to the council had grown increasingly confused. The humans defied categorization. They were technologically primitive, yet had solved social problems that plagued advanced species. They were physically weak but emotionally resilient. They competed fiercely yet cooperated without hesitation. Most puzzling was their treatment of the Vrak's team. Despite having no previous contact with insectoid species, the humans showed neither fear nor disgust. They accepted the aliens' appearance with remarkable ease. Perhaps, Dong-ho wrote in his final report of the week, "We have discovered something more valuable than advanced technology. The humans appear to possess an adaptive social capacity that our species lacks. They connect without calculation. They help without guarantee of return. They welcome without condition." He paused before adding, "I recommend continued observation. The humans we never expected may have much to teach us." 2 weeks into the observation mission, Dong-ho's report to the council was filled with contradictions. The humans display completely irrational behaviors, he explained via secure transmission. They allocate significant resources to creatures with no genetic relation to them. "Elaborate," requested Council Elder Juwu. "They keep animals in their dwellings that serve no practical purpose," Dong-ho said. "They call them pets and treat them as family members. They speak to these creatures knowing they cannot reply with the same complexity." Field researcher Min-jae added, "I witnessed a human spend 3 days' worth of food credits to provide medical care for an aged canine that will, by their own admission, likely die within a year." When I questioned this logic, Dong-ho continued, the human became emotional and said, "You wouldn't understand. He's my friend." The mission's cultural specialist, Hyunwoo, reported even more perplexing observations. They create art with no practical application. They gather in large numbers to watch other humans pretend to be people they are not. They cry over fictional scenarios and laugh at abstract concepts. Most disturbing to the council was Hyunwoo's final observation. They form attachments to those outside their genetic lineage that appear as strong as those within it. They call many unrelated individuals friends and will sacrifice resources and safety for these connections. This makes them unpredictable. Elder Ju concluded. Yes, agreed Dongho, but not in the ways we anticipated. Later that evening, Dongho observed a human family watching a sunset. They were doing nothing productive, simply sitting together, occasionally speaking softly, sometimes touching hands. The complete lack of purpose to the activity fascinated him. When one of the children noticed him watching and waved him over to join them, Dongho hesitated, then approached. The small human patted the grass beside her. "It's pretty, isn't it?" she asked, pointing at the oranges and purples spreading across the sky. "It is a normal atmospheric light refraction," Dongho replied. The child giggled. "You're funny. Just watch." So he did. The next day, Dongho joined Minjae on a visit to a human educational center. Young humans of various ages gathered in separate rooms according to their development stage. The VRAX scientists expected to observe strict training for practical skills. Instead, they found one room where small humans played with colored blocks, another where they created pictures with no practical function, and a third where they sang songs about imaginary creatures. What skills do they learn from this activity? Minjae asked the human educator. Creativity, cooperation, and joy. The woman replied. These are as important as math and science. The VRAX exchanged confused glances. In their society, young were trained only in useful skills. Activities without clear purpose were considered wasteful. Later, they visited a place called a hospital. Here, at least, they expected to find logical behavior. Preserving life was a universal priority. But even here, the humans surprised them. This human has suffered brain damage, explained Dr. Doyan, pointing to a patient. He cannot speak or move independently, yet his family visits daily to talk to him and touch his hand. Can he understand them? Asked Dongho. We don't know, the doctor admitted, but they say it doesn't matter. They come for him, not for response. Minji's antennae twitched with confusion. They invest time with no measurable return. Yes, said Dr. Doyan simply. That's what humans do. That afternoon, they observed a human ritual called a birthday party. A group gathered to celebrate the day a small human had emerged from its parent. They brought wrapped objects, sang noise patterns, and consumed a food item covered in small flames that the child then extinguished. What practical purpose does this serve? Dongho asked his host, Hana. It makes Joe happy, she replied, watching her son open colorful packages. And it teaches him he is valued simply for existing. In VRAX society, value comes from contribution, Dongho noted. Hana looked at him thoughtfully. Don't you ever do things simply because they bring joy? Dongho had no answer. The concept of joy as a goal rather than a side effect was foreign to his species. That evening, Dongho observed a behavior that particularly confused him. A human female was leaking water from her eyes while watching a series of moving images on a screen. Are you injured? He asked with concern. No, the human laughed, wiping her face. I'm crying because the movie is sad. But these events are not real, Dongho pointed out. That doesn't mean the feelings aren't real, she responded. The next day, Dongho visited a place humans called a park. Here, they engaged in even more puzzling behaviors. Some humans ran in circles on designated paths, returning to their starting point with no apparent goal. Others threw circular objects to canines who returned them, only to have them thrown again in an endless cycle. Most interesting was a human feeding small birds. The creatures were not his property or pets. They provided no service. Yet he spent resources on them with no expectation of return. Why do you do this? Dongho asked. It makes me happy to see them eat. the old man replied. And the world feels better when we care for other creatures. Dong Ho recorded this observation carefully. The human concept of improving the world through non-productive acts of care had no parallel in Vrak's philosophy. At the weekly report to the council, the research team struggled to explain human behavior. They appear to make decisions based on emotional responses rather than logical outcomes, Minju reported. They value intangible concepts like beauty and happiness above efficiency. Could this be a primitive evolutionary stage? Asked Elder Zhu. I do not believe so, Dong Ho replied. Their technology advances rapidly, yet they maintain these seemingly inefficient behaviors by choice. It appears to be a different evolutionary path, not an earlier stage. That night, Dong Ho was invited to a music concert. Humans gathered in a large room to listen to others create organized sound patterns using various instruments. The audience sat completely still, doing nothing productive for 2 hours. Afterward, he observed humans discussing the experience with great excitement. Did you feel how the second movement just opened up your heart? One asked. The crescendo nearly made me cry, another responded. Dong Ho could not understand how organized sound created physical sensations in organs, or why inducing liquid from eyes was desirable. When he returned to his temporary dwelling, he found Hana and Jiho looking at old images of a human who resembled them. This was my father, Hana explained. He died 5 years ago. Yet you maintain his image and speak of him, Dong Ho noted. Of course, said Hana. We loved him. Love doesn't end when someone dies. This concept of love remains unclear, Dong Ho admitted. Jiho looked up at the alien with surprise. Don't you have love where you come from? We have biological imperatives for species continuation and practical arrangements for mutual benefit, Dong Ho explained carefully. Hana and Jiho exchanged sad glances that made Dong Ho uncomfortable. As the sun set that evening, Dong Ho found himself returning to the hill where he had watched the sunset with the human family days before. To his surprise, the same family was there again, engaged in the same apparently purposeless activity. The small girl spotted him and waved enthusiastically. You came back, she called. Come sit with us. Dong Ho hesitated, then settled his insectoid body onto the grass beside her. My name is Sora, she said. What's yours? I am Science Officer Dong Ho of the Vraks. That's a big name, Sora laughed. I'm going to call you Dong Ho. As the sun painted the sky in colors the Vraks had never bothered to classify, Dong Ho felt something shift in his scientific perspective. There was something here he could not measure or categorize, something the humans valued that his species had never considered important. When Sora's small hand reached out to touch his exoskeleton again, he did not correct her terminology this time. It's pretty, isn't it? She asked again, pointing at the sky. Yes, Dong Ho replied, surprising himself. It is pretty. The solar flare warning came without enough time for proper evacuation protocols. Earth's primitive detection systems hadn't identified the threat until it was imminent. A massive ejection headed directly toward their hemisphere. The Galactic Council received the Vraks team's emergency transmission and immediately issued orders. Secure yourselves and essential equipment only. The mission takes priority over local intervention. Dong Ho relayed these instructions to his team, but found himself hesitating when he saw the humans' response. Rather than panicking, they had organized, establishing shelters, coordinating transportation, and prioritizing the vulnerable. We need to help, said Research Assistant Jisu, watching the humans work. Our orders are to protect ourselves and our mission, Dong Ho reminded her. Look at them, Jisu persisted. They're including us in their evacuation plans. It was true. The humans had allocated space in their shelters for the alien delegation, despite limited capacity. When the emergency alert sounded, Dong Ho made his decision. We will assist. The team deployed their advanced technology to strengthen human shelters and enhance early warning systems. As they worked, a distress call came through. One of the Council's observation vessels had been damaged by the flare's preliminary wave and was making an emergency landing. "They're crashing near the river basin," reported Hyunwoo. "That area is already being evacuated." Without waiting for orders, a human emergency team redirected toward the crash site. Dong-ho and his team followed, arriving just as the ship skidded across the earth. Its hull breached. The occupants were Mralg, a species that had historically conflicted with the Vraks. Yet when the damaged ship's door opened, revealing injured aliens, the humans rushed forward without hesitation. Dong-ho watched in disbelief as humans carried wounded Mralg to safety, applying medical care without regard for species differences. One family even cleared space in their already crowded shelter for a particularly injured Mralg scientist. "Why would you help them?" Dong-ho asked the family later. "You don't know them. They're not even from your world." The father looked confused by the question. "They needed help. What else would we do?" That night, as the solar storm raged above their reinforced shelter, Dong-ho watched humans sharing their limited supplies with both Vraks and Mralg alike. His understanding of the universe shifted in ways his analytical mind couldn't yet process. Morning brought reports of the flare's impact. The protective measures had worked, but outlying areas had suffered damage. Dong-ho watched the shelter coordinator, a human named Sung-ho, organizing recovery teams. "We need volunteers for the Eastern District," Sung-ho called. Nearly every human raised their hand. "I don't understand," Min-jae whispered to Dong-ho. "They compete for the opportunity to place themselves at risk." "Apparently so," Dong-ho replied, his antennae twitching with confusion. A small group of humans approached the Vraks team. "We could use your help," said their leader, a female called Mayang. "Your species can see heat signatures, right? There may be survivors trapped under fallen structures." Dong-ho hesitated. Council protocols strictly forbade direct intervention in primitive societies. Yet these humans had risked themselves to save unknown aliens. The logical balance had shifted. "We will assist," he decided. In the damaged areas, Dong-ho witnessed more puzzling human behaviors. They worked tirelessly to free those trapped, regardless of whether the victims were strangers or family. They shared limited water supplies equally. When Dong-ho located a human child buried under debris, 3 adults immediately placed themselves at risk to extract her. "You should calculate the resource value against risk," Dong-ho told them. "She's a child," one responded simply, as if this explained everything. Most surprising were the interactions between humans and the Mralg. Despite having never seen such beings before, the humans showed no fear of their tentacled forms or their acidic speech patterns. When a Mralg scientist offered technical assistance with power restoration, the humans accepted immediately. "Aren't you concerned about their intentions?" Dong-ho asked Hana, who was coordinating medical supplies. "They're stranded visitors who need help," she replied. "Just like you." By midday, Dong-ho received a priority transmission from the council. Elder Jiwoo's image flickered above his communicator. "Your mission parameters have been compromised," she stated. "You were instructed not to interfere." The situation required adaptive response. Dong-ho replied carefully. "More concerning is your proximity to the Mralg." Jiwoo continued. "Need I remind you of the conflicts between our species? The humans do not distinguish between us," Dong-ho explained. "They offer assistance to both Vraks and Mralg without regard for our historical disputes. This is precisely why primitive species require oversight," Jiwoo said firmly. "Their naivety endangers established galactic order. Withdraw your team to your vessel immediately." Dong-ho's mandibles clicked with uncharacteristic frustration. "Elder, with respect, the humans have demonstrated significant crisis management abilities. Their approach to the emergency has been surprisingly effective." "Your report suggests emotional contamination," Jiwoo observed. "Return to your vessel for decontamination protocols." The transmission ended before Dong-ho could respond. He stood motionless, processing this exchange. For the first time in his service, council orders felt incorrect. Nearby, He observed a young human offering water to a Mralg scientist. Despite the Mralg's acidic metabolism, which made sharing resources potentially dangerous, the human had found a suitable container and appropriate liquid. "How did you know what they need?" Dongho asked. "I asked them," the human replied simply. "Then I found what would help." So direct, so adaptable, so unlike the rigid protocols that governed Vrac society. At that moment, a second emergency alert sounded. The solar flare had triggered seismic activity near the main evacuation center. Hundreds of humans and both alien species were at risk. The Council's orders were clear: protect the mission, not the locals. The logical choice was to return to their vessel and avoid further involvement. Dongho looked at his team. Jisu's antennae were already angled toward the evacuation center. Min-jae had begun gathering sensor equipment. Hyun-woo was consulting with a human emergency coordinator. "The Council has ordered our withdrawal," Dongho announced. His team stopped and turned to him. No one spoke. No one moved toward their vessel. In Vrac society, orders were absolute. Hierarchy maintained function. Yet here, watching humans rushing toward danger to help others without calculation of benefit, something inside Dongho's rigid exoskeleton seemed to soften. However, he continued, "I believe our mission to understand human behavior requires continued observation from close proximity." Relief visibly passed through his team. They immediately resumed preparations. As they hurried toward the threatened evacuation center, Dongho spotted Sora and her family helping elderly humans onto transport vehicles. The small human waved excitedly when she saw him. "Dongho, are you coming to help?" "Yes," he replied, surprised at the certainty in his voice. That evening, as humans, Vracs, and Mralg worked together to stabilize the evacuation center, Dongho observed a small human child sharing food with a Mralg youngster. Despite their radically different biologies, they had found items both could consume. "We need your help with the Eastern Barrier," Sungo called to Dongho. "Your exoskeleton can withstand the radiation levels better than our suits." Without hesitation, Dongho followed. Council protocols seemed increasingly irrelevant in the face of this crisis. The Vracs had always valued logical efficiency above all else. Yet the humans' seemingly illogical compassion had created an emergency response more effective than any Dongho had witnessed on developed worlds. Later, in a quiet moment, Dongho found himself beside a Mralg scientist named Taylor. Under normal circumstances, they would avoid all contact. Their species had fought 3 wars over resource territory. "The humans are unexpected," Teller noted, acid speech hissing through translator filters. "Indeed," Dongho agreed. "Their response defies logical prediction." "They offered my team shelter without asking our purpose here," Teller continued. "They treat us as equals." The 2 alien scientists sat in uncomfortable silence, centuries of conflict between them. "Perhaps," Dongho said finally, "there is something to learn from their approach." As the night deepened and the emergency stabilized, Dongho recorded his report for the Council. For the first time in his scientific career, he hesitated over the wording. "The humans have demonstrated unexpected crisis response capabilities," he began formally. Then, after a pause, "their ability to set aside differences and cooperate without hierarchical direction suggests an evolutionary path we may have overlooked. Their emotional responses, which we previously classified as weakness, may actually represent an adaptive strength." He knew the Council would not approve of these conclusions, yet after watching humans risk themselves for strangers, even alien strangers, the old certainties of Vrac superiority seemed less absolute. Outside the shelter, the solar storm was beginning to fade. Dongho stepped out briefly to observe the sky. Earth's magnetic field shimmered with the discharge of solar energy, what humans called the aurora. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said a voice beside him. It was Hana, looking exhausted but peaceful. "It is an atmospheric phenomenon." Dongho began automatically, then stopped himself. "Yes, it is beautiful." 6 months after first contact, The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with debate. On the central platform stood Dongho, now Earth's official liaison. "The vote stands at 12 for inclusion, 11 against," announced Elder Juwu. "Final statements may now be presented." Ambassador Soman of the Theoretical Dangers Committee rose. "The humans remain unpredictable. Their emotional responses override logical considerations. This poses a potential threat to established galactic order." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber until Dongho stepped forward. "It is precisely this unpredictability that makes humans valuable. While we were calculating the mathematical benefits of saving the Mralg vessel, they were already pulling survivors from the wreckage." He displayed holographic images of the solar flare rescue. "They call it compassion, a concept that transcends species boundaries and mathematical logic." The final vote narrowly approved Earth's inclusion in the galactic community. Trade routes were established, though many species remained wary of human unpredictability. Most fascinating to Dongho was how quickly human concepts began spreading. The word friendship, a relationship based neither on genetic connection nor mutual advantage, required new translation algorithms in several languages that had no equivalent term. At the newly established Cultural Exchange Center, Dongho observed species that had been locked in millennia of logical stalemates finding new ways to interact. A young Vrac scientist and a Mralg historian, traditionally enemies, were collaborating on a project, sometimes disagreeing but continuing to work together. "We're friends," the young Vracs explained when Dongho questioned this arrangement. "You've adopted a human concept," Dongho noted. "It's more efficient than hatred," the scientist replied simply. Later that week, Dongho received a peculiar invitation from the human family that had sheltered the Mralg scientist during the solar flare. They were celebrating the one-year anniversary of meeting new friends from the stars and wanted representatives from both species to attend. When he arrived at their dwelling, he found Mralg and humans sharing food and exchanging stories. The children had created artwork depicting both alien species alongside humans. "They possess no objective value," Dongho said, examining a child's drawing of himself. The mother smiled. "Not everything valuable can be measured, Dongho." It was a concept his analytical mind still struggled to process, but had begun to accept. The following month, Dongho welcomed the first official human delegation to the Galactic Hub. The 5 representatives looked around with wide eyes at the massive space station orbiting a neutral star system. Species from across the galaxy moved through the grand halls, some floating, some crawling, some shifting form as they traveled. "It's like something from a dream," whispered Hannah, who had been selected as the science representative. "Or a movie," added Sunho, the cultural attaché. Dongho led them through security protocols, explaining the basic rules of the hub. Each species has different needs and customs. The primary rule is respect for differences. "That seems simple enough," said Mayang, the diplomatic leader. "It has not been simple," Dongho corrected. "Many species here have fought wars over these differences." The humans looked at each other with surprise. "But you're all so advanced," said Jiho, the youngest delegate, now a student representative. "Technological advancement does not automatically create social harmony," Dongho explained. "This is why your inclusion is controversial." At the official reception, many species kept their distance from the humans. The Vrax Council members watched disapprovingly as Dongho introduced the delegation. The Mralg representatives approached cautiously, acid speech bubbling through translators. "We remember your assistance," said lead scientist Teller to Hannah. "It was unexpected." "We're just glad we could help," Hannah replied with a smile. Nearby, Elder Juwu observed this exchange with obvious concern. That evening, the humans were given a tour of the hub's greatest achievement, the knowledge repository. Here, the collected wisdom of 1,000 worlds was stored and shared. "You may access any non-restricted information," explained the repository keeper. Jiho immediately requested information about art forms across the galaxy. Sunho asked about cultural celebrations. My young studied diplomatic protocols. Their curiosity seemed boundless. They absorb information quickly, noted the keeper to Dongo. But do they understand its proper application? They apply it in unexpected ways, Dongo admitted. The next day brought the first challenge. The humans had set up their assigned quarters in a manner that puzzled Dongo. Rather than organizing separate functional spaces as protocol suggested, they had created a common area where they all gathered. This is inefficient, Dongo pointed out. Your work productivity will decrease. But our happiness increases, explained Hana. And happy people work better together. When Elder Juwu came to inspect their setup, she was visibly disturbed. This demonstrates precisely the problem. They prioritize emotional satisfaction over logical efficiency. With respect, Elder, Dongo began carefully. Their approach may have merit worth studying. Juwu's compound eyes fixed on him. You have been contaminated by their thinking, science officer. The comment stung, but Dongo found himself unable to deny it. As the humans settled into the hub, strange things began happening. The trill, a crystalline species that rarely communicated with others, began lingering near the human quarters, drawn by the music they played. The volith, a species that communicated through color changes, found the humans could actually distinguish their subtle emotional hues better than most. Most surprising was the effect on the youngest hub residents, the few children present on the station, offspring of diplomats and researchers, were normally kept separate according to species. Yet somehow, they began gathering in the recreation area when the humans were present. They teach games that have no winners or losers, reported the concerned supervisor. Activities with no practical skills development. What is the purpose? Asked Elder Juwu. Fun, replied Dongo, using the human word that had no direct translation. A month into the human residence, Dongo noticed something unprecedented. A young Vrax and a young Ralg were playing together in the recreation area, supervised by Jiho. Their species had been enemies for centuries, yet here they were, building structures from blocks together. This is highly irregular, said Taylor, appearing beside Dongo. Yes, Dongo agreed. Yet, interesting. My offspring asked to attend a human birthday celebration yesterday, Teller continued. Acid speech bubbling with confusion. I find myself unable to provide a logical reason to refuse. The two scientists watched the children play in silence. That evening, Dongo received an urgent summons from the council. Elder Juwu was waiting with several other elders. The human influence is spreading too rapidly, she stated without preamble. Their concepts of friendship and cooperation without benefit are disrupting established protocols. Is disruption always negative? Dongo asked carefully. When it threatens the order we have maintained for millennia, yes, Juwu replied. We propose limiting human access to common areas and restricting their cultural sharing. Dongho's antennae flattened against his head, a sign of disagreement rarely shown to elders. That would violate our own principles of open exchange. Their influence must be contained, insisted Juwu. Later, Dongo shared the council's concerns with Hana as they walked through the hub's botanical garden. They fear what they don't understand, Hana said simply. That's not unique to any species. They fear change, Dongo corrected. Our systems have been stable for centuries. Stable isn't always the same as good, Hana pointed out. Before we met you, we thought we were alone in the universe. Now we know better. Change can be wonderful. She stopped to touch a plant from her world that had been added to the garden. Look, it's already adapting to the different light here. It's growing new patterns in its leaves. Dongo studied the plant. Adaptation can be beneficial, he admitted. 6 months into the human integration, the galactic hub had changed in subtle but unmistakable ways. Species that had never collaborated began sharing research. The communal dining area, once strictly organized by species, now featured mixed groups engaged in what humans called conversation, rather than formal information exchange. Most remarkable to Dongo was the celebration organized to mark the Earth's solar year. Representatives from 17 species attended, bringing food, music, and customs to share. Even a few Vrax elders participated, though Elder Juwu notably abstained. As Dongho watched humans teaching the trill a dance pattern while Mralg shared their luminescent poetry, he recorded his observations for his personal log rather than the official council report. The humans' greatest strength may be their ability to find commonality across difference, he noted. Where we built systems to manage our differences, they build connections that transcend them. It is inefficient, unpredictable, and possibly better than our way. When a small Vrax child approached him holding artwork she had created under Jiho's guidance, a colorful depiction of Dongo with impossible purple eyes and green antennae, he accepted it with proper gratitude. It possesses no objective value, the child said, mimicking his earlier words. Perhaps, Dongo replied, carefully storing the image. I was incorrect about value. Some things cannot be measured, only experienced. The attack came without warning. The Korthar, a predatory species from the Outer Rim, had begun systematically conquering worlds beyond Galactic Council protection. Their expansion was coldly efficient, no negotiations, no mercy. Their fleet has breached the Mralg colony at Proxima IV, reported Admiral Jihun at the Emergency Council session. Casualties are extensive. Our tactical analysis suggests we withdraw from outer systems and consolidate defenses around core worlds, proposed Strategic Director Yunji. The mathematical outcome favors preservation of primary species over outlying colonies. Dongho, now holding Earth's council seat, listened as logical arguments for abandonment of vulnerable worlds continued. The cold calculations made sense, until the human delegation requested permission to speak. We propose an alternative, said the human representative. A mutual defense pact that prioritizes protection of all worlds, regardless of strategic value. The council erupted in debate. Illogical, some called it. Mathematically unsound, insisted others. Perhaps, acknowledged the human, but we believe the Korthar's strength comes from isolation. They attack worlds separately because united, we would be stronger. Despite skepticism, Earth's proposal gained traction, particularly among worlds at greatest risk. The alliance formed quickly, but too late for the Vrax mining colony at Kepler-62f, which sent distress signals as Korthar ships entered their system. The Galactic Fleet was still mobilizing when Earth's ships, smaller, less advanced, but numerous, broke formation and jumped to the Vrax colony's defense. What are they doing? Demanded Elder Juwu. Their vessels cannot withstand Korthar weapons. Dongho watched the tactical display as human ships deployed in seemingly chaotic patterns, drawing Korthar fire while evacuating Vrax civilians. Their battle strategies defied conventional logic, sacrificing tactical advantage to save individual lives, risking superior vessels to protect damaged ones. When a human ship was critically damaged after shielding a Vrax evacuation transport, Dongho expected them to abandon the vessel. Instead, other human ships closed ranks around it, forming a protective barrier until rescue could arrive. The Korthar, faced with an enemy that wouldn't behave according to logical battle doctrine, faltered. Their perfect mathematical formations broke against human unpredictability. When the Galactic Fleet finally arrived, they found the Korthar retreating. In the aftermath, as casualty reports came in, Dongho visited the human medical ship where both Vrax and human wounded were being treated. In one corner, he found a small Vrax child whose parents had been killed in the attack. A human doctor noticed his attention. "We couldn't save her family," she said quietly. "We don't know what to do for her when she recovers." Dongho stared at the child for a long moment. "I will take responsibility for her," he said finally. The doctor looked surprised. "You're not related, are you?" "No," Dongho replied. "But a human once told me that not everything valuable can be measured. I believe I understand now." As word spread of humans risking everything to defend the Vrax, historically one of the most isolated and self-protecting species, perceptions across the galaxy shifted. The trait that many species had considered a weakness, humans' emotional attachment to others, had proven to be their greatest strength. And as Dongo sat beside the orphaned Vrax child, he realized that the humans had changed more than galactic politics. They had changed him too. 3 days after the battle, Dongo stood before the full Galactic Council. The chamber was packed with representatives from all member species. Even those who rarely attended were present. The Korthar threat had changed everything. "The humans' defense of our mining colony defies understanding," stated Elder Juu. "They sustained 17% casualties to protect a facility of minimal strategic value." "They did not calculate value as we do," Dongo replied. "They saw lives, not numbers." The council chambers fell silent as footage played from the battle. Human ships moving in formations no tactical computer would recommend. Human captains ignoring orders to retreat. A particularly small vessel positioning itself between a Korthar cruiser and a Vrax transport full of children. The Korthar expected logical responses, explained Admiral Jihoon. Their battle computers predicted our movements based on optimal survival patterns. The humans did not behave optimally. Yet they succeeded where our calculations predicted failure, noted Umralg representative. In the days that followed, Dongho worked tirelessly to implement the human defense plan. Species that had never cooperated now found themselves training together. Ancient enemies shared technology and resources. The concept of mutual protection spread rapidly. Most surprising to Dongo was the reaction from his own species. The Vrax had always valued self-preservation above all else. Yet after seeing humans sacrifice themselves for Vrax children, something had changed. "We wish to contribute ships to the human-led defense force," announced a Vrax military commander. "This contradicts our established security protocols," Elder Juu reminded him. "Perhaps our protocols require updating," a commander replied. Meanwhile, Dongo found himself facing an unexpected personal challenge. The young Vrax child, now recovered from her injuries, had been placed temporarily in his care. Her name was Neri, and she had not spoken since losing her parents. "Her physical recovery is complete," the human doctor explained, "but emotional trauma takes longer to heal." "Vrax do not experience emotional trauma in the same way," Dongo stated automatically. The doctor looked at him skeptically. "Are you certain about that?" That evening, Dongo attempted to establish a proper care routine for Neri. He arranged appropriate nutrition, optimal sleeping temperature, and educational materials suitable for her development stage. Everything logical and proper. Yet the child simply sat, antennae flat against her head, eyes fixed on nothing. Dongho's training offered no solution for this situation. Unexpectedly, it was Sora who provided guidance. The human child, now serving as a junior cultural ambassador, visited Dongo's quarters. "You need to hug her," Sora said simply. "Physical contact serves no functional purpose," Dongo replied. "It tells her she's not alone," Sora explained. "That's the most important thing when you're scared." Dongho's analytical mind rejected this approach, yet his observations of humans suggested they might understand emotional needs better than his species. Awkwardly, he extended his arms toward Neri. The young Vrax looked up, confused by this uncharacteristic behavior from an adult of her species. Then, slowly, she moved into his embrace. Something shifted inside Dongho as the small child pressed against his exoskeleton, something he couldn't measure or categorize. 2 weeks later, the Korthar attacked again. This time, they targeted multiple systems simultaneously, expecting to overwhelm the divided defense forces. Instead, they found a unified response. Species that had never cooperated fought side by side. The battle was fierce but brief. On the command ship, Dongho watched with Elder Juu as the Korthar retreated from the unexpected resistance. "I still do not fully understand this alliance concept the humans promoted," Juu admitted. "It defies mathematical optimization." Perhaps there is a different kind of mathematics at work, Dongo suggested, one that values connections over calculations. That evening, Dongo returned to his quarters where Neri was waiting. The child had begun speaking again, asking questions about humans and their strange ways. "Why did they help us?" she asked simply. Dongo considered how to explain this to a young Vrax who had been taught only logical value assessments. "They believe all lives matter," he said finally, "not because of what those lives contribute, but simply because they exist." "Is that true?" Nari asked. Dongo thought of the human ships he had watched sacrifice themselves. He thought of Hana and Jiho and Sora. He thought of the doctor who had stayed with Nari day and night. "Yes," he said, "I believe it is." 6 months after the first Korthar attack, representatives from all council species gathered for a formal alliance ceremony. At the center stood the human delegation alongside representatives from species that had once been bitter enemies. Dongho watched as ancient protocols were set aside. New words entered the galactic lexicon: friendship, compassion, cooperation. Terms that had once been dismissed as primitive human concepts now formed the foundation of a stronger union. After the ceremony, Dongo found Nari waiting with Sora. The two children, one insectoid, one human, had become inseparable friends. "Are we safe now?" Nari asked, her antennae raised in the Vrax expression of curiosity. "We are stronger together," Dongo replied, using the human phrase that had become the Alliance motto. As they walked together through the great hall of the galactic hub, Dongo reflected on the remarkable journey from first contact to now. The humans they had never expected had changed everything, not through superior technology or military might, but through their surprising capacity to